Okay, welcome to Grief Chat with myself, Mark Lemon. Today's episode, I'm speaking with social media content creator and blogger, Karen Howden, and mental health coach and EFT practitioner, Kim Murray. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Mark.
As a brief introduction, would you be happy to just introduce yourselves to the viewers? And that will be for you, Kim.
So my experience with grief was I was 7 years old and my dad very, very sadly took his own life. And as a child, especially back then, I'm 37 now, so it's a long time ago, I wasn't given any tools. I wasn't offered any counselling. The schools weren't really even told about it. I wasn't really offered any kind of support. So at the time, I felt really a lot of anger. Anyone that has experienced kind of grief in general, but suicide in particular, I felt really angry because I felt that he'd left me. I felt that he had a choice. I didn't really understand mental health. Of course I didn't. I was only 7 years old. So I felt abandoned. So it's very confusing as a child to think I should be feeling really sad, but what I feel is so angry, so angry. And I do think that kind of anger and grief, same with anger and anxiety, they're almost the same thing. They definitely manifest from grief. So my personal kind of journey was that I just suppressed it. I completely hid it. I pretended that I was completely okay. And I pretended that I was this happy child. And really in my head, it was kind of for survival, because I was like, well, if one parent's done that, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I said the wrong thing. So if I'm perfect and I don't try and make any mistakes, no one else will kill themselves. And that was my internal dialogue as a child. So I put huge amounts of pressure on myself to do the right thing and say the right thing. And it was really only when I experienced complete burnout when I was 32, and it was a completely different situation. It's complete burnout at work. And I lost all my mental health. So I had severe anxiety that had then led into depression. Did I really then firstly have a window into my dad's world and really started to understand that actually, of course, there still is an element of choice, but I really understood what it's like to lose your mental health, and what it feels like to feel like you can't go on anymore. And then luckily I did something called the Hoffman process. So it's a very kind of intense retreat for your mind. And that was really the first time in my life that I properly was able to process the death of my dad. And it was really quite transformative for both my mental health, but also my physical health. So I'd really held a lot of grief in my gut. I'd had horrific digestive problems my whole life. And then that completely transformed. So it really, it took me that long to even begin to grieve.
Mm. And how about you, Karen?
We, as a family, lost my brother last April. So we're going on, 17, 18 months since Craig took his life. And he was 30. Lovely, lovely boy. There's me and then him and my sister, who is 28. So he was the middle child. And I think the thing that we struggle with the most is forgetting or dealing with the fact that we are now a family of 4 rather than 5. And so it was a shock to everyone. But as we have sort of began processing this, we've kind of started to join the dots. And, you can't help yourself by trying to spot signs that might have been there that you missed. I mean, the problem for me is I live 600 miles away from the rest of my family, so I didn't get to see him a lot. And it's very difficult to be able to live with that guilt. I think that's the thing that's really difficult to process is, what if I was there more? What if I got him to come and live with us for a bit to build him up? What if? And of course, these are questions that you can't necessarily get satisfying answers about, because I can't ask Craig. I mean, I've tried asking Craig, but I can't get those answers that I need.
Both incredibly difficult stories, but very different stories in the same way, aren't they? In the sense of Kim being 7, you only being last year, you and your brother was 30, wasn't he? I think.
Yeah.
And both, I mean, Kim, can you remember the age of your father when he died?
Yeah, he was, oh gosh, I think he was 49 from memory, around 49, 50. So really not very old at all. And one thing that's really interesting is I remember my mum was 42. It's actually, no, he must have been 52. And my mum was 42 and my boyfriend has just had his birthday and he's turned 42. And what's really interesting with grief, as you both know, is that it kind of really, it hits you in different waves. You'll be completely fine, and then there'll be something that will make you think about that person. And that was really interesting for me, thinking, wow, my mum was this age, the same age as my partner, when her world completely fell apart. And you're absolutely right, Karen. The thing with suicide, as a slight difference to other grief, is that you're always questioning whether you could have done more. Is it something that I could have done? Did I do enough? Were there signs? And the same with my dad. He hid it very, very well. In hindsight, when I know his brother also killed himself, so my uncle also took his own life, and I think my dad always harbored guilt for that. That's a bit of another story, so I won't go into it. But in kind of, it's only upon reflection can you then see, okay, understand why he would have been struggling with his mental health. And it's only really now, me working in mental health, can I piece it all together and go, of course he would have struggled. But unless you kind of really understand it, that's the problem. It's you can't see mental health.
Yeah.
So you don't know it, and people are really good at hiding it, and that's a difficult thing.
And I think the reason I wanted to ask about the ages was because it seems to be getting lower and lower. In 2019, there were 5,691 suicides registered. And, the ages, I know they say that it's between sort of the 40s and, but they are getting younger. And with Suicide Prevention Day, which was last week, and how important these days are, what can we do more every day, do you think? Is there anything we can do? And, this is to you, Karen.
I think the thing, and I know it's a cliche, but just being able to talk about it, being able to express your feelings and not harboring any sort of struggles that you have, because that's kind of, you're sort of following the same track as I'm following the same track as my brother. And I mean, we as siblings have all struggled with mental health. And I think now more than ever, I'm starkly aware of the importance of getting things off your chest. And I'm lucky enough to be in a profession where I can spew out all of the things that I think about, and no one really gets to question it, because that's what I do on social media. I talk about things, and my mum sometimes will text me and she'll be like, oh, I didn't know you felt like that. We spoke on the phone today and you didn't say anything. And I kind of have to say to her, well, it's like a journal for me. Like, social media is a way for me to work things out. I mean, I might start talking about something and not realize how it's going to end up, but it's just my process of being able to untangle all the thoughts in my head. So to have 30,000 people listening to me and not necessarily giving me their advice back is actually very therapeutic.
That is the power of social media, isn't it? And that's like you say, and I can say this too, in terms of just, more often than not, I'm talking about my own feelings than I am anybody else's. But if it can resonate and help, then fantastic. But that is the power of social media in the positive sense. And how about you, Kim?
So I guess there's two parts, isn't it? So for people that are grieving, I would say really just, because I guess I could teach this a lot, but the main thing is to really tune in to your own feelings every single day. Quite often you may feel angry, or you may feel sad, or you may feel anxious. Really allowing yourself to process those emotions, and that's obviously what I teach through meditation and emotional freedom technique. But when we suppress our emotions, and when we try and ignore them, and through many different ways, things just become overwhelming. So allowing yourself every day, and it doesn't need to be long, even so I would say what I do every morning is I do what I call a morning check-in, and it's a morning meditation, but it's really simple, and it's just really deepening your breath, because that's one of the best ways to really calm and soothe your nervous system. And if you've experienced grief, often your body can be in a state of fight and flight. So you want to just make sure that you're as calm and relaxed as you can possibly be throughout the day. So always starting your day connecting to your breath is a brilliant way to calm and soothe your nervous system. But it also means you can then tune into how you're feeling and actually really notice, God, okay, yeah, maybe I feel quite angry today, or maybe I feel a bit lost. Really being able to identify it. So then what you don't do is then project it onto others in another way, because that's often what you can do when you're grieving. If you ignore how you're feeling, and then suddenly you'll get really angry at the bus driver or whoever it might be, and you're like, hang on, this is nothing about them, I'm not okay. So tuning into how you feel, and just really allowing yourself to process it. So that's one of the best things I do. And if you're grieving, what I also do is I visualize my dad every single day. So for years I didn't do this, and it almost felt it was too painful, it was too much. And I think if it's an early grief, it absolutely can feel like too much, absolutely. But what I now do is I visualize my dad every day, and I ask him, what words of advice would you give me? Certainly when you lose a parent, that's something you always crave. You're like, what would they give me? What would they say to me? And then different messages will come up. And for me personally, that makes me feel really calm and grounded, and it makes me feel really connected to my dad. I feel more connected to him weirdly now than I ever did my whole life, because I allow myself to listen to him, and really tune in. And I truly believe that when someone passes away, their energy lives on inside of you. So it's really empowering to actually tune into their energy rather than push it away. And of course, for anyone struggling with their mental health, I would say the same thing. Really, really nurture your mind every day. It doesn't need to be for long, but just do it first thing in the morning before you're kind of consuming so much information. Give yourself at least 5 minutes in the morning to tune in, because the more you do that, the more you strengthen your mind, and the more things won't become overwhelming. The more you'll be able to process your emotions as and when they come up. And that's why meditation is so powerful, because it strengthens your prefrontal cortex here, which is your brain's ability to self-regulate your emotions. Because obviously we can't control what life is throwing at us, but we can control how we react. So that's definitely the best way to just start every day, and it doesn't need to be for long at all.
Yeah, no, some great tips from you both. I guess moving into the big elephant in the room this year is COVID-19, and how a lot of people out there have been struggling with their grief, and I'm just wondering how you both have navigated these strange last 6 months.
Definitely, I think from a grief perspective, it gives you that space to reflect. And so for a lot of people, grief has really been coming up for them. But one thing that grief does give you, and I know, Mark, you say this a lot, is that it does give you a power. Because if you can deal with that grief, you can deal with anything. So having to stay home, that's really not the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Like the good thing, with my dad dying in that way, it kind of really gave me, I've always had quite a good perspective on life, because you're like, well, you know what? It's probably not as bad as my dad killing himself, so I think I'll be okay. So I don't know if that sounds a bit weird. I hope that sounds right, but
no, it doesn't.
You're able to logic. Do you know what I mean? You're able to logicalize it. You're like, oh, I have to stay in. That's okay.
Yeah.
And how about you, Karen?
In terms of us as a family, where we've got 3 boys, 7, 5, and 2, who are insane. They're like having 3 puppies, and it is exhausting. Like following them around the house is just being exhausting. So having them back at school now is a bit of a relief, because the tension between a married couple having to like constantly be tidying and not actually spending time together has been quite difficult. So that's eased a bit. But for me, in terms of my personal grief outside of our family unit, because, you know, I agree that you have the role of mother to focus on, don't you? And so you kind of throw everything into that. And I feel that I've been doing that since Craig died. I mean, even when it was Craig's funeral, I felt like at least I have my boys to pour all my love onto, and that's been a real sort of distraction. But at the same time, it's really important to identify when you need some headspace. And so what I will do is I'll give Chris that look. It's like, I need to just have some time out, and I'll go for a walk or a cycle, or even just nip out to the car park of Tesco just to have a little downtime. I think that being in your own brain, I think as a mother or as a parent, you're such a giver and you're giving everything to everyone else. But like you, what I've had burnout in the past few years before Craig died, actually. And the giving is too much. And if you can't have the stability mentally to keep your family going, then, you know, it's not good for anyone, is it? So bit of downtime is always good, even just a box set on Netflix.
But it's really important to have that quiet sort of, you know, reflection in your own space, definitely.
And it's hard as a parent. It's really hard. Like, when do you get any time to yourself?
Yeah, exactly.
So you are, you know, you're constantly switched on, and it is hard as a parent to find that time and not be like, okay, I'll put my self-care to one side because my daughter is more important. And actually, that's not the right way around. I need to make sure that I'm constantly finding time for myself. And that is really hard as a parent. Really hard.
It's quite a new concept, isn't it? Putting yourself first. And it shouldn't be a new concept, because we do need that. And I think that we need to keep kind of reinforcing that by talking about it. Social media, all the self-care that's around, I think we just need to keep pushing that positivity.
Yeah.
And especially talking about this subject, and obviously, you know, festivals like this are fantastic for just sort of putting a spotlight on grief. So kind of moving on to anybody out there that's currently struggling with their grief and they're having a bit of a tough time. Have you got any advice?
I think it's important to find the positives in every day. I mean, things that I've never really experienced grief directly, other than like grandparents passing away. But then when it's someone close to you that you don't expect to leave, it's a completely different sort of grief. And so you don't really know how it's going to affect you. And for me, some of the positives that have come out of this, I mean, Craig would not believe the things that have happened since he died, let alone COVID. I mean, he would just be conspiracy theory all the way. But I think what's important, I've got these new relationships with his friends. Like, I've got close to them, and through our grief, we've been able to share our experiences. And like on Craig's birthday this year, well, actually last year as well, I got a phone call from his best friend, and we're like reminiscing, and people that I was in school with that we lost touch have really sort of rallied round, because they're all still in the same town, and we keep up to date. And so for me, that positive gives me a little lift, because I feel that out of a bad situation, some good has happened. And I think that it's brought us closer together as a family as well. And I think so for people who are struggling with grief, I think it's so easy to sort of let the negative desperation wash over you. And it seems a bit jarring to think about positives, because you kind of feel that you don't deserve to be happy. You shouldn't be laughing. You shouldn't smile. You shouldn't find anything funny because you're in this grieving mode. But actually, those little golden nuggets, little rays of sunshine, they're the things that are going to pull you out and be able to help you get some sort of perspective, because I think that obviously there's a place initially for, I mean, well, it's natural that you have the guilt and the negativity and the animosity. I think animosity with suicide, particularly, like, you're just so angry, like Kim was saying, you just get so angry. But you have to, at some point, be able to let those feelings go, because if you don't, it will eat you up inside, and you'll never be able to progress to a positive place. Like, I don't want to be angry at my brother. I want to be able to smile and reminisce about the things that we did. And without going into his story too much, like, as weird as it sounds for him, like, this is what he wanted. This is what he thought would be the best option for him. So he wouldn't want us to be sort of grieving and being sad and feeling sorry for ourselves. So if you have got the energy, you have got the motivation to do something that makes you feel good, makes you smile, then that is absolutely worth doing, because it's just those little things that will slowly help you climb out of that well that I always imagine grief is.
Yeah, there's some really great points there. And how about you, Kim?
Yeah, I think the main thing with grief is because, because it's not linear, it kind of hits you in different waves. The best thing I could say to anyone grieving is to really allow yourself to feel sad, to feel all that anger or that guilt or whatever it is. Really allow yourself to feel it, because when we suppress our emotions, it's obviously it's really not good for your nervous system and your body, but it's also not good for your mind and your mental health. So really listening, taking time, just a little bit every day, to really tune into how you feel. And then depending on how you feel, doing something about that. So whether that's it, okay, maybe I do need to do a bit more meditation. Maybe I just need to journal today. Maybe I just need to move. Maybe I just need to dance. Maybe I need to work out. For me, boxing was amazing at releasing anger, because I was like, I can physically punch something, and which might sound weird because I'm a meditation teacher. It's so good for my mental health, because I felt really angry, and that is what I personally had to process, was that anger. And boxing for me really helped me do that, so it doesn't have to be just meditating. It can be moving, it can be work, whatever it is that you feel your energy needs. Because when you keep ignoring and suppressing your own needs and how you're feeling, it will just become overwhelming. And the thing with grief is that it will always be there. You're always going to miss them. Maybe you just need to spend time just looking through old photos. Maybe you need to speak to a loved one and just say, Mum, can you just tell me some really good memories about Dad? Or, especially if you're, and this is for any, young minds watching this, asking your mum or your dad to say, can we just talk about Dad? Can we just, or talk about Mum? Sometimes you do need to talk about it with people. Sometimes you might just want to raise a glass and celebrate their life. Really tuning in to your own grief, because like Karen said, it's completely unique to you. So finding that time to process it in your own way. And then I wrote a list, because I know, you were saying about how the positives from grief, which might sound really bizarre, but I honestly think that if my dad hadn't have died when I was 7, I wouldn't have had all these other beautiful qualities in life that I'm so pleased I have. So I wrote a list because I don't want to forget them. So the first one is, obviously, you don't sweat small stuff. You can have a really fascinating perspective on life that a lot of people might struggle with. And that's really, an amazing thing to have, just having that perspective. You appreciate how short life is. So I think a lot of people can go through life and you forget to just appreciate the fact that you are alive. The sky is blue, the sun is shining. That gratitude for life is something really amazing that grief gives you. And I've put here gratitude. So you do have a gratitude for what you do have, because when you've experienced that loss, you're like, okay, well, that was so big, but you can have this small gratitude for the tiny things that you do have in life, because you know what that loss is like. And grief kind of gives you a drive. It can be a bit of a bizarre drive, but it's because it is such a kind of a powerful mental health thing that you're dealing with, it can give you a drive to drive you forward. For me, certainly, it meant I worked really hard, probably too much. In fact, that's probably why I burnt out. But it made me work really hard. It made me want to keep going. It made me almost want to prove that I was enough, which I know I shouldn't, I shouldn't have done. But it did drive me forward to succeed and to do what I do now. And obviously now I teach. And it gives you this bigger, you have an open mind to the universe. We live in this amazing universe. And I think grief makes you open-minded. It makes you, I think if you've spoken to anyone that's actually lost someone, and that there's a different energy because they get what that feels like. So you become a lot more philosophical about the universe and what's out there. And I think that only makes you a better person. And I think, the last bit of advice I would say to anyone grieving is that always remember that their energy lives on in you. This is my personal belief. This is science, actually. This isn't just my personal belief. We are all balls of energy. Okay, that's fact. So I believe that anyone that has had played a strong part in your life, especially if they're a relative, a brother or a dad or whoever, they have impacted your energy. They have, on a cellular level, they are part of you, especially if they're family. They are literally part of you. So always remember that energy does live on inside of you. So really, my personal belief is, although they are physically gone, they never truly leave you. I believe that they're always there.
That's a really nice way of putting it. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. It's something it's weird. Do you know, it's weird as well. It's not even something that I've just thought. It's something I've always thought. Ever since I was a little girl, I've always thought that. I've always thought, well, I kind of believe that was meant to happen. Weirdly, it was a way that I kind of maybe helped to deal with the grief. But I always felt that actually he lives on inside of me. So he's not really truly gone. And it is a really lovely thing to remember when you are grieving.
Yeah, it is. I think that I've sort of thought that a similar thing, but I've never been able to articulate it like that sort of energy bottle, because the way that Craig made me feel, or the way that he still makes me feel, is unique, isn't it? It's like a unique relationship, unique bond, and that's still there. That still lives in me. So,
well, your experiences shape your brain. So your brain is plastic. It's not hardwired. So your experiences and the people around you physically help shape your mind. So you've been impacted by them on so many different levels. So that's why, even though they're physically not gone, you really can feel them. But I think that's important to not suppress it, is to actually really tune into their energy, because they will give you advice. They will give you words of wisdom. They will give you, maybe sometimes I might tune into my dad's energy, and he might say, believe in yourself. You've got this. Now, wherever that comes from, that's what I need, and it gives me confidence. So definitely visualization is a really lovely way to tune into someone you've lost as well.
No, they're amazing points. And I want to say I'm with you on that one too. Like he walks with me every day. The love never dies. It's just kind of always my feeling and my thought process that, since a boy, and I always say I was kind of steered in a different path, but I believe that was his energy pushing me in a certain direction, and I believe that from every little thing I've done, I, like you, Kim, and I'm sure like you, Karen, as well, I've been tuned into him. I don't need to look at a picture. I close my eyes, I feel him. And for anyone out there grieving, it might feel strange. But I bet you when you do that and you tune into it, like you say, and you open your heart and your mind, you will feel them. And that's where they will always be. But look, both of you, I just want to say a huge thank you for today. Thank you for speaking with me. Thank you for sharing your stories with the viewers and the festival. I know it's going to be hugely important to a lot of people out there.